I want to start with you, Doctor, because we learn also from what The Guardian is reporting about Mark Meadows' book that Trump was actually symptomatic, right, throughout this whole process. As early as September 26, he was a little tired. They suspected he had a little cold. And this went on for days, obviously, until we found out many days later that he was positive. What revelations, what questions do these revelations raise for you?
Well, first of all, Brianna, we knew last year, several of us last year were saying that the president had to be positive at the debate or before the debate, because when it was announced that he tested positive 2 days after the debate, he was already quite sick and then was hospitalized the next day. And typically it takes about a week after someone tests positive for them to become ill enough to be hospitalized. But this revelation, I mean, really the big story to me is that the White House knew that the president was positive on Saturday, 3 days before the debate. They did a second test with an antigen test, which is significantly less sensitive than the rapid molecular PCR test that the White House was using at the time, in which the president tested positive. So what this tells me is that the White House team, the president, his entire senior staff, were willing to endanger anyone and everyone in order to advance the president's electoral chances. They were not going to retest him before the debate because they knew he was already positive. And the big picture is that they were willing to endanger the life of Joe Biden and his team by having the president attend that event positive.
Not to mention,
they were willing,
not to mention the Gold Star families and everyone else that the president the former president came in contact with over those days, right?
Right. And also, one other thing, the president's physician, Sean Conley, knew that he was positive. And if there was a conflicting test, you would never rely on an antigen test to be the confirmatory test. You would always do a PCR test. So Dr. Conley knew that the president was positive. He should have prevented the debate from going forward. And if he had any honor, he would have resigned rather than let that go forward.
Former President Trump is responding to a report that he tested positive for COVID 3 days before a debate with Joe Biden last fall. Now, this comes from The Guardian, reporting details of a new memoir from Trump's former chief of staff, who we've been discussing, Mark Meadows. This news and the timeline that Meadows reportedly is laying out in this memoir raises a lot of questions. CNN's Gabby Orr is live in Washington, joining us with more on this. Gabby, Trump, in his statement, is essentially accusing Mark Meadows of lying.
So what's interesting about this statement, Kate, is he's saying that a test that he took before the presidential debate with Joe Biden back on September 29th of 2020 did not have COVID, revealed that he did not have COVID prior to that debate. What he's not acknowledging in this statement is what Mark Meadows said happened, which is that he received a positive test at one point prior to that debate in the 72 hours leading up to it, and then received a negative test. And what Meadows acknowledges in his book is that the negative test was basically taken as gospel inside Trump's inner circle, and that they proceeded as normal and totally ignored that previous positive test. So, not to parse the statement there, but it is interesting that he does not directly contradict what Meadows did say in his book. What is interesting about this entire episode is what it says about the way that the Trump White House handled the COVID-19 pandemic and internal outbreaks of the virus inside that inner West Wing circle. After he received this initial positive test, the president did multiple events, both indoors and outdoors at the White House, before even going to that debate where he faced off with Joe Biden.
Trump was on Marine One on September 26th, Mark Meadows writes, when the White House doctor called up and told Meadows to stop the president from leaving for a rally in Pennsylvania. Why? Because the president, the White House doctor said, had tested positive. But Meadows did not stop the president. After Trump boarded Air Force One, Meadows called him with news of the diagnosis. Trump's reply, Meadows writes, rhymes with, "Oh, spit, you've got to be trucking lidding me." Yes, I just said that on television. We're back with our panel. It's funny in the sense that Mark Meadows tries to hide the words there, but it's not funny it's not funny to think that the President of the United States at the time, heading into a debate with his rival, plus his own staff and all the people around him, tested positive for COVID, went to give a rally, and essentially just said to hell with the COVID protection rules at the time.
Yeah, and it's because that's who Donald Trump is and was. He only cared about himself, only cares about himself, not people around him. And so he was gung-ho on doing whatever he wanted, whether or not he was putting other people in harm's way. And listen, he probably did. I mean, given what he was doing at that point, he was likely spreading it. And listen, almost nothing is shocking, what we learn about this president. And this, in some ways, isn't shocking either. I remember at the time, there was sort of like, was he positive on stage with Biden at the time? There was sort of, speculation about that. And come to find out, he likely was.
Yeah, I mean, I was laughing at your rendition,
I get it.
not this, because it is reckless. Not surprising, but incredibly reckless. And yes, when you look back, first of all, the White House, or not the White House, the former White House, the former president is claiming that it was a false positive, and so on and so forth. But come on, he had COVID. Yeah. He was in the hospital. He was in Walter Reed. He was in really bad shape not that long after that. So that is the reality that that we saw with our own two eyes. And at that debate, he was sweaty. He was off. He was all of those things, and he put the lives of the people on that stage, never mind his opponent, the person who beat him, everybody there, and everybody at the White House at serious risk.
Right, and to your point, because Donald Trump thinks about one person, Donald Trump. Number one, you see debate pictures there. Number two, go back in time. We were going back through this morning. You were here at the table many times at that period of time. September 26th is when Meadows says he tested positive. On September 27th, he had a military families event, an indoor press conference. September 29th was the debate. It was October 2nd that they announced the president was tested positive. But remember, that was also the same time he appointed Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. They had that event at the White House that turned into a super spreader. Several people at that event ended up testing positive, including members of Congress, ended up testing positive for COVID, the president and the first lady as well, Kellyanne Conway. And the COVID guidelines at the time, if you test positive, isolate for at least 10 days. If you develop symptoms, isolate for 10 days after symptoms begin. Stay in touch with your doctor. Those were the CDC guidelines at the time. And the president of the United States, who, of course, was also telling people maybe ingest bleach or take hydroxychloroquine. Yeah.
Right. I was at that Rose Garden event, and I remember, we were outside, so that obviously helped things a bit. All the reporters were in the back. We were all masked, even though we were outside. But there was no social distancing, no masking. We knew of events, receptions inside the White House where they were mingling, hugging, kissing each other because they were happy about the Supreme Court nomination. But certainly, the former White House put so many people at risk because of their reckless approach to COVID protocols. There was one line from the Meadows, the excerpts of Mark Meadows' memoir that I found interesting when he feigned surprise that he had actually contracted COVID because the former president was a, quote, massive germaphobe. He always had hand sanitizer around him. But remember, Trump almost never wore a mask during the pandemic. And we know, even early on, that masks help contain the spread. I think there were maybe twice that he had worn a mask because he had to. So it really shouldn't have been a surprise that this happened, but it is really still stunning that he would put so much danger to people around him.